Right now we are on the San Francisco waterfront, but if you take a look across the bay, you can see Alcatraz, the island where America sent its most dangerous people to be forgotten forever. They called it the Rock.
They call it that for a reason. For 29 years it was a fortress of concrete steel perched on an island wrapped in freezing deadly currents. This was the end of the line. It was a prison no one was meant to ever escape from.
But how on earth in 1962 did 3 men seemingly vanish from the island?
Their disappearance kicked off one of the greatest manhunts in the US history and created a legend that we're still obsessed with today. This is the definite story of that insane prison break.
We are on the island now. We are making our way all the way to the cell house, which is on top of the island. And while we are making our way all the way up there, I want you to imagine the 12th of June 1962, 7:15 a.m. and the guard is doing his morning routine through the cell house block B.
He gets to the cell of inmate Frank Morris. It's time for the morning count, but Morris isn't moving. The guard barks at him to get up, but the man stays still. Annoyed, the guard reaches out through the bars to shove him, and the head pops right off, clattering onto the concrete floor. Within minutes, this whole place erupts. Sirens are screaming across the island. 2 other cells are found empty, each with a similar, creepily lifelike dummy head tucked in the bed.
So 3 men have actually escaped from the inescapable prison. And with that, a desperate search started that lasted for decades and led to a mystery that lasts basically until today. It leads to the question, did they actually make it to freedom? Or were they Alcatraz's last victims that were claimed here by the San Francisco Bay?
To really get how audacious the 1962 escape was, you have to understand this place itself. Before it was a federal prison, it was a military fort guarding the Golden Gate since the 1850s, long before the famous gangster showed up. The island was already a place of confinement, holding military prisoners during the Civil War. For over 80 years, the US Army used the island's isolation as a weapon. In fact, some of its earliest prisoners were Native Americans. Then, in 1933, during America's war on organized crime, the island was handed over to the Federal Bureau of Prisons. It was transformed into a new kind of hell, a maximum security, minimum privilege prison built to break the will of the country's toughest inmates.
Men like Al Capone called this prison their home. The daily life here was pretty basic. People had very small cells, little privacy, and routines that they repeated every single day. However, the real warden of the prison wasn't a man, it was actually this bay here behind me. The water temperatures here in San Francisco Bay are extremely low and the currents are very strong. And the location of Alcatraz was meant to make the escape of the prison absolutely impossible. But there were attempts of escapes. There were 36 attempts, but the prison always bragged that in the 29 years of history of Alcatraz, no one ever managed to escape. Within the 36 attempts, there were 6 people that got shot, 2 people that officially drowned, and then there were also 3 people that simply vanished into the night. So who were these 3 guys that thought they could outsmart the Rock? They weren't the average convicts. They were actually bank robbers and escape artists, so to say. Frank Morris was the most famous one. He was the leader of this whole process. He was orphaned at 11 years and he was flagged by the FBI as an escape artist. He was known to be very smart. He was the one that initiated this whole legendary escape of Alcatraz. Frank Morris partnered up with 2 brothers. The Anglin brothers were good with their hands and they were known as bank robbers and also known to have escaped from other prisons before, which is how they actually landed on Alcatraz. And then there was a 4th person, which was very unfortunate because he didn't manage to try the escape, or maybe he was actually fortunate because we still don't know how this escape actually ended for the 3 that managed to escape. The 4th person was Allen West. He became the most tragic figure of this whole escape plan because he didn't manage to escape with the other 3 men. He just didn't manage to get out of his cell on time. However, he became the person that was able to tell the officials what actually happened and what they had planned. This way, we now know exactly how they planned the whole escape and what they did after they escaped. We can also enter one of these cells, and it feels pretty claustrophobic, to be honest. It is tiny. Everything that fits in here is basically one bed. We have a toilet there, a wash basin, and that's it. It is more or less 2 meters long and maybe 1.5 meters wide. It is tiny, and this is everything people had. This is what they called their home. These three men weren't just desperate, they were extremely methodical, and they thought about every single detail of their plan. They studied the prison's weaknesses, the prison's routines, and its blind spot to create this almost perfect escape plan. They dug holes into the concrete walls of their cells, and you might now think, how can you dig a hole into a concrete wall without guards noticing it? Well, they made use of the music hour they had every evening. There was 1 hour to play music, and Frank Morris played the accordion, an instrument that he was able to play pretty loud so that nobody would hear the noise of digging holes into the walls. Behind the walls there was a corridor that was ignored by the guards. So the three men escaped through the holes, the small holes in their cells, into the corridor, and from there they used pipes to go up on top of the building. On the roof of their cell block, the four men set up a workshop, and there they built a raft. They built it from raincoats that they had either stolen or some were donated by other inmates. And they tied those raincoats together to a raft that was airtight with the steam pipes that were on top of the roof. Another brilliant and very important part of their escape plan were the heads that were made of toilet paper, cement dust, and glued together. They looked extremely real because they were painted with skin-colored paint, and they used hair from the hairdresser. And then the night of the 11th of June 1962 was perfect for their escape. There was a lot of fog here around the bay, which was kind of a natural shade for them to escape. So in that night, the plan was to once more climb up onto the roof of their cell block. Frank Morris and the two brothers managed to escape through their cells. However, the fourth man, Alan West, he tried to hide his hole in the wall with cement, and that cement hardened and it was hard for him to escape. He had to kind of dig a hole again, which caused him to be late for the escape. Frank Morris and the two brothers weren't able to wait any longer, and they had to escape by themselves. From the roof, the three men climbed down, crossed the courtyard, climbed over a 12 feet high barbed wire fence, and they ended up here on the northeast shore of the island. Here they inflated their raft and they tried to cross all the way to Angel Island, which you can see here behind me. A little bit after 10 p.m, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers set off on their very last journey and into darkness until today. In the meantime, Frank Morris managed to get out of his cell, but it was obviously too late already. Later on, the guards found him, and Frank Morris saw this as his only chance to cooperate with the officials and the FBI. So he told them the whole brilliant plan of their escape. But there was one question that obviously remained, and that was what exactly happened to the three men that managed to escape. Later on Angel Island, there was a wallet that was found. However, the three men never appeared again. The plan was to steal a car over there and to steal some clothes and to get out of San Francisco as far away as possible. However, if they ever managed to do that, stays unclear. The next morning was extremely chaotic. The FBI started its biggest manhunt using helicopters and lots of people that were involved. However, they didn't find much. They found a paddle over there on Angel Island, and they found some pieces of the raincoats that was washed ashore. But that's it. The men disappeared forever. And the FBI was searching for them for 17 years. But in 1979, they finally ended their search. And until today, the official story is that the three men were killed by the strong currents and the ice-cold water here in the San Francisco Bay. It was a tidy end to an embarrassing security problem of Alcatraz. And with that, the reputation of Alcatraz of being an inescapable prison was forever ruined. Most people think that the story of Alcatraz ended in 1963 when the prison was shut down. However, a few years later, in November 1969, Native Americans arrived here on the island and claimed it theirs. At its peak time, there were more than 400 people here. They built up schools, they built up a radio station, and they called this place theirs for several years. Until today, we can still see signs like this one here behind me, Indians welcome. They haven't been removed, as it is part of the history of Alcatraz.
After its closure, Alcatraz wasn't seen as a landmark, it was seen as a problem. The federal government debated selling it, redeveloping it, or even tearing the decaying buildings down altogether. But when the Native American activists occupied the island, they transformed Alcatraz into a powerful symbol of indigenous resistance and forcing the nation to look at it differently. The occupation drew global attention to the oppression of Native Americans and the US government's history of broken treaties. Federal marshals removed the last occupiers in 1971, but the impact was huge. It's credited with helping end the government's policy of terminating tribes and kicking off a new era of Native American self-determination. This occupation saved Alcatraz from demolition, and instead of disappearing, the island was preserved, eventually becoming part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area and one of the most visited prison museums in the world today.
I personally love telling stories and mysteries like the one of Alcatraz. If you do like these stories as well, make sure to subscribe to the channel because I will continue to talk about mysteries around the world. Now let me know in the comment section below what you think. Do you believe that it was actually possible for these guys to cross all the way over to Angel Island through these ice-cold waters or not?
Was it really possible for the three escapers to outsmart the system one last time, paddling into the fog and into a new life, leaving behind a mystery for ages? The truth is, we will probably never know for sure, and maybe that's exactly why we're still talking about it. The 1962 escape from Alcatraz isn't just a cold case, it's a modern myth. It's a story about an unbeatable system versus the unbreakable human will to be free.